Hi, F. Welcome, everybody. I'm just excited about this evening. We have a fantastic panel today. Welcome again for everyone who just joined. A quick note about organizational aspects before we start. You can always ask questions during our conversation. It will be a panel, so it will be a little bit different than the rest of the time we had together. So you can ask questions. It will be about ethics. You saw that. If you look in the section with the navigation bar from Zoom, you will see there's a Q&A section where you can actually ask the questions. And I'm actually not alone moderating this evening. So I would like to introduce Andrea Diner. Andrea, welcome. She's a journalist and she's also blogging and writing about AI, a lot of things, doing a lot of interviews. And when we are preparing the subject of today, which is just exciting for all the years and will never end, I guess this topic will just never be finalized in any aspect. We discussed who we could invite, and so we have Dalith and Sophie today talking to us. But Andrea will tell you more about that. Andrea, welcome, and it's actually on your side now to take the lead.
Thank you, Stefan, for introducing me. And yeah, I'm really honored to moderate the panel tonight. And I'm happy to talk with Dalith and with Sophie. I already have interviewed both women in terms of artificial intelligence and the ethical and societal implications of this stuff we already know about it. And Dalith is co-founder of SwissCognitive. This is artificial intelligence network where people and customers can connect with each other and talk about artificial intelligence and what is the best way to introduce it to their companies and to their enterprises. And Sophie is the co-founder of Stop Hate Speech. And both women will discuss how artificial intelligence will help companies on one hand side, and on the other hand side, how artificial intelligence can help to be more ethical as a society and as enterprises. So I would like to ask both of you, Dalith and Sophie, what does ethics mean for you in terms of artificial intelligence? Maybe Sophie can start with the answer.
Well, that's not an easy question, but I think for me, in digitalization, that means as well that politicians and society make democratically legitimized decisions and rules of the game and actively deal with them, and not just simply leave the whole discussion to a few people to decide what's okay and what's not. And I think civilizations should really have a discussion about what they want to see, how they want AI to happen and how it should be. And now you hear my baby boy cry. I'm really sorry.
Sorry. And Dalith, what do you think about the ethical implications for AI?
For me, first of all, like what do we understand, or would I understand if we're talking about ethics in AI? For me, it's about responsibility. Where and however we implement or develop AI, it always needs to be in a responsible way towards a human being.
Mm-hmm. During our conversation, you once said that artificial intelligence needs to be a sales hit for countries, not only for Switzerland, but I guess that we could adopt this tethers onto other countries as well. Where do we stand right now from your standpoint with artificial intelligence and how this could impact countries and enterprises in the end?
First of all, I'd rather talk about applied intelligence or cognitive technology because there is no magic. I think it's very important that we are aware of that. We're not talking about sci-fi, neither Terminators. It's a really down to earth, checking what use cases do we have already where we can apply cognitive technology to support the human being in different ways, doing our, like developing our products or services smart. And there, on one hand, we do have already a lot of great use cases, especially in healthcare, but also in other industries. So from that perspective of the possibility where we can implement and increase the benefit for the human being in different industries, we have already. From the perspective of knowledge, what AI can drive to really down to earth, there is a lot of work to do to explain so that everyone can understand, and also discuss these ethical aspects, but also to manage fear.
Mm. And what would you say the educational part, is it very important, because you already mentioned all these horror movies we already know since, I don't know, 30 years or so. From my perspective, or from my feeling, we are still in the phase of education. What would you say in this regard?
Not where we should. There's a long way to go. And if we're talking about education, then for me, it's very important that we talk about the population, and population are the kids, our adults, our elderlies. It's everyone. It's not only companies and their employees, because at the end of the day, whatever we're doing for the human being, especially for the future generations.
And Sophie, could you explain a little bit about these educational part? I could imagine that your project Stop Hate Speech in the Internet has many things to do with the term of education. What would you say?
Yes, sure. I mean, one of the big reasons why we started this project was also that we saw that every one of us who might be not the nicest one on the internet is always having a big influence on younger people, because we are the ones showing them how to react on the internet. And we see that a lot of people, also older people, talk a quite different language in the online world they would do in the offline world. And I think there has to be a big education. And I think we had a shift in the last years that we saw that people get now that the internet is not a free space where they can say whatever they want. They know that there are also legal grounds they have to take care of. But still, I think there's a lot of education needed in the next years that, yes, that we all learn how to have discussions.
So education also implies a responsibility. So the responsibility of people and from enterprises. How would you judge this? I would say the corporate digital responsibility. I don't know, digital responsibilities of from people. How would you judge the impact of these words, Dalith?
The one thing are the words, the hypes, and the other thing is what we're really doing. And I would say we have a lot of corporates, they're taking it really serious, and they're also getting more and more under pressure, because this is what we need to do. We have to implement certain rules. There's a whole policy making topic, especially the ethical aspects, all the discussion around bias. And talking about that, we have to take into consideration that this is also a question of culture. What is right, what is wrong, and who has the right to say what is right and what is wrong. So this is definitely a very difficult task, the very difficult topics that the corporates need to look after. And it's not only the corporate responsibility, it's definitely also from the political side a responsibility. So somehow we have to sit all together, one table, and discuss. And certainly a lot of things like that happening on different levels.
Talking about responsibility, I think, Sophie, your project has so much to do with responsibility. Maybe you could explain a little bit about your project, what you're doing with Stop Hate Speech in the Internet. And I think that you can also connect it with the responsibility of normal people, Internet users, and maybe you can then explain how artificial intelligence can help maintaining this responsibility.
Yes, thank you. So I was asked to held a quick presentation, and I hope I will not bore you too much, but hang on, I will open it quickly. It's a bit easier. Coming. Sorry. Okay. So, yes, you can see my screen. Is that right?
Yes, everything perfect.
Okay, perfect. So yes, my project is about hate speech on the internet, and I think we know, every one of us knows that it has become quite a global problem, and the barrier for hostility and insults has fallen quite dramatically the last years. And I'm talking about never has it been possible to see so clearly how hatred on the internet can pose a threat to democracy, when also corporates don't really have the responsibility, and I think they learn it now quite the hard way, actually. So after weeks of inflammatory attacks on the internet, the hatred speech from social media turned actually into the offline world, and the attack on the oldest democracy was witnessed in real time. And however, this spectacle does not stand alone. For years, we have seen how hatred on the net has repeatedly translated into the offline world. In 2015, during the big wave of refugees in Europe, social media was filled with hate against refugees, and in Germany, countless refugees' homes were set on fire, and even misogyny from the keyboard has turned into attacks from the internet. Many statements are still without penalty, and many statements remain uncommented. Civil courage is often searched for in vain on the internet, and our project does not let comments like this just simply stand, and we want to react on them. And that's maybe also an explanation why Allianz F, I'm director of Allianz F as well. It's a women's organization is trying to acting against hate speech. For us, it's really important that women are represented in politics, in science, in the economy, in the general public, as well as in the virtual sphere. And research has shown that women are sexualized and vulgarly assaulted much more often than men. They receive rape threats and are confronted with stereotypes, and this leads women to reacting differently on hate speech. They withdraw from the online discussion and social media way more than men do. And as a result, social media are no longer open for a large part of the population, and women who are already underrepresented in public sphere will withdraw even more. And that's dangerous, because a democracy can only exist if all citizens are given the opportunity to participate in the discourse. And that's also why Allianz F had set itself the goal to addressing this issue, with the aim that all people can participate on the internet without fear of violence. We have launched Stop Hate Speech. So we see it as a necessity to take action against hate speech, and we do this with a little friend. That friend is also a little bit AI, and I would like to introduce them to you. I hope you can hear the sound now.
Botdog is a digital algorithm trained to find hate speech on the internet. Botdog brings back suspicious material. We decide if it's hate or not by swiping right or left. Botdog gets smarter with each evaluation. the only way to stop hate speech is to interfere with counter-speech. Are you aware that violence causes more violence? Haters usually stop when feeling supervised.
Great.
So yes, that's Botdog. In our project, we have programmed an algorithm named Botdog, and this little dog searches the internet for hate, and as soon as it finds it, it brings it back to a community of volunteers, and these in return can reject the hate with counter speech. And just to talk a little bit about AI and biases, so far there is no universally accepted definition of hate speech. And if you would ask 3 people what they think and classify as hate speech, they would have 4 opinions. In our team, we have 7, I think. So hate is a very subjective feeling, and it's more of a spectrum than really science, exact science. So it's always a challenge to build an algorithm on subjective assumption. And to get around this problem, the project has engaged civil society. We launched a web rating app. It's like a Tinder for hate speech, where I can swipe left or right, whether I think a comment is hate speech or not. And over the past month, around 1,200 volunteers have trained Botdog from scratch by assessing whether comments contain hate or not. And Botdog has learned to detect hate speech on the internet itself. The community has done more than 52,000 evaluations by now. And Botdog is not just trying to find hateful comments, but comments they get hateful within context. And as an example, I always bring this one. In the comment section of a French-Swiss magazine, there was a comment saying, "I hope where they're going, there are good showers waiting for them." And this comment seems to be totally fine, standing alone, but there was an article about a Jewish family immigrating. And with this example, you can see how a totally okay comment gets illegal after time. So Botdog is also trying to find hate speech within the context. And he has now a find rate of around 85%, but he should get better over time because he always learns from the community. As soon as Botdog finds hate speech, he brings it back to the community, and then the community does counter speech. So real people step up to counter speech. They should reject comments and actively participate in discussion. And the community doesn't only do this with the help of Botdog. We have also programmed the whole platform where you can find a lot of information and help and chats and whatever. And actually, the whole project should be an impulse project. So we want the spark to jump to the broad civil society. We really want to encourage civil society to become active by itself, because it should become just normal to react on hate speech and to reject it instead of being unsettled. And that I don't talk too long and we can go back to the discussion. I think I will end here. I could talk like miles about counter speech and what's good and what's not, but maybe we have time after to discuss exactly that. Yes, Stefan.
Just one quick thing, because we have a comment here in the chat. You might have seen that. Peter was just saying, "Cool initiative, Sophie." So
Thanks.
let's go ahead. We have already questions from the audience. Andrea would ask you, shall I read it, or do you want it to postpone it a little bit to the end?
If you don't mind, you may read it, because I can't
Yes.
see it very
No worries, I can do that. I'm moderating you, audience. Thanks for the questions.
Yes, okay.
So, one question from Zinne. But is there any standard definition of ethics? For instance, when dead people are brought back to virtual life, is that a good or an inappropriate act? Is it ethical and healthy?
Honestly, I nearly didn't hear you.
Yes, no problem. Cinema, I'm just asking you, can you, I give you the right to speak.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I want to thank you for this initiative and this and sharing all this precious information. I'm from Morocco, by the way. So my question is about first, is there any standard definition of ethics? Because I think it depends to people, it's something subjective. First, second, recently we start knowing about some applications where I describe it this way: dead people are brought back to virtual life. So I saw a mom; she was talking to her kid who was dead a few years ago, and other examples. So is that ethical? Is that healthy for the society? They are doing this. Do you think they will make a favor for the mother who lost her kid? But is it ethical? Is it appropriate? And thank you.
So I would, I haven't understood to whom you would like to address this question.
It's up to you.
Okay. I thought you mean Dalith. So yeah, maybe this brings me to a broader statement, and I would say that if I interpreted this correctly, that you mean what that you raise up the question, what is ethic and what not? And I think Sophie already mentioned it, and we are already aware of it, that it's a very difficult question. That's a very individual question and a personal standpoint where ethics begins and where not. What do you think, Dalith and Sophie, about it?
First of all, I would like to thank you, Sophie. I think I could listen to you for hours, and I hope we can get on this discussion also later. And being a mother of two teenager girls, I'm very much aware about how important this is. Coming back to the question of ethics and what does that mean, you mentioned, I just put some notes, one sentence that you mentioned, and I think this brings it very clear: we decide whether it's hate or not, meaning we do have an algorithm, it goes through, it places back to the human being. And this shows a very nice example of that we as human beings can't outsource the responsible to any kind of algorithms. So this is one very important point. Now coming to the question of, sorry, I didn't got the name, about, okay, so is it ethical or not? What subject ever we discuss. For me, it's very important that we are aware of that it's dependent on the culture. We feel offended differently than other cultures. And we know from a business perspective that there are special courses if you have to deal with another culture like Chinese, from Japan, from Europe or the States. Even myself being half Israeli and half Swiss, I'm telling you, I had a tough time, and sometimes still today, if I have to deal with Israelis and to Swiss people. It's a different culture. There is no right or wrong. It's a different attitude. And this is what makes it really, really difficult to say, okay, now what is right or wrong? Mm-hmm. And I think what you're doing, Sophie, brings, because it's like a global initiative, or at least we have to make sure it gets global. The algorithm starts to learn from all different cultures. And perhaps this will help us to define what exactly are the ethical boundaries that we have to make sure that we heading them by developing any kind of cognitive technologies.
I totally agree. I think what we saw very clearly as well with our hate speech Botdog, that even in Switzerland, we have a totally different culture than our French part of Switzerland, and language is so different, and what we can say here is totally okay and not in the French part. So we think it would be good if we could as well implement this project in different countries, but still have to see and figure out what kind of locally differences they have, and might also have to change a bit the algorithm, what's actually good and what's not. And I think then there is another maybe political view that I think it's quite interesting that in Switzerland, for instance, we have a commission on health ethic. They always get together and decide whether something is ethical or not. So there is a big discussion. And I'm still wondering why there's nothing, not anything same for the internet. Why is anything technical not discussed in politics? And I'm still quite shocked what happens in the States, and now it's still Twitter and Facebook deciding whether it was okay or not. But there is no political discussion. I even wrote to the UN ambassador of Switzerland in the UN saying, like, now it's the time to have this discussion multilateral. You have to find your rules to really step up to say what is ethical, what's okay, what's not okay, and what kind of internet techniques, AI do we want as a world and as a common world? Yes.
And what was his answer?
Well, she's totally okay. She said, let's have a call, but let's see. I mean, that's the beginning. But I mean, I think, yeah, it's just to say, like, I think it's really now an opportunity or a necessity to step up against it or do something now before something else happens. And we're like, oh, nobody have seen that coming. Yeah.
I have another question which connects to your answer or to both answers of you. It comes from Peter Janes, and he is asking, which is very interesting for me, do you think hate speech should be removed automatically, similar to removing graffiti? And this brings me also to consequently ask consequent question, democracy and censorship. What do you think about when we would remove hate speech automatically? What would this be for censorship and for the whole issue of democracy? What do you think about it, Sophie? And then maybe Dalith can also make a statement on that.
I think here as well. I mean, there are statements that are clearly illegal and they have to get removed. And there are a lot of stuff which is very hateful, which is just not illegal. And there, I think it is hugely important to have more discussions. And as I said, more civil courage and as well as more education. And here we come back to the education again. Sometimes I feel like 95% of the people on the internet are very mad people. And then I look into the society and I see, okay, that's not what society is, but there are people who are really, really loud on the internet. And where are the others? So what we think would be better than censorship is to encourage the diversity of opinion and not censor someone, and really show more civil courage and encourage people to step up and talk. And I think that could also be a solution to try to break a bit this massive streams of left or right, or not being able to talk to each other anymore. If we would have rules of how we communicate, but then communicate with each other and not just simply delete something, but really try to have a discussion. I would love it being once in the comment section and learn something because people had a good discussion, and that's never happened before for me on Facebook or Twitter. Well, Twitter sometimes, but that's a bit my wish.
Yeah, I think from my side, one thing that I had to learn, and this is something that I've learned from IST for Peace, it's always very important that we know where the sources are. One thing that we discussed, for example, about autonomous weapon, when I said, right when I started getting more and more into the subject of AI, I said, wow, this must be forbidden. This is really dangerous. And one of the things that they explained to me is, listen, if you forbid something, you will have difficulties to check a country. If you have a certain charter where you describe what is okay and what is not, you will always have the possibility and the legitimacy to go to check whether a country is actually acting within those rules. Saying that, if we think that that if we remove every hate speech immediately, it will be very difficult to actually realize what people are planning, attacking, or whatever they have in mind. So it is even an important information, so we are able to act according to what they're planning. And if we don't listen to them, it may be even worse.
So you would say that hate speech could be an initial point to get back to the old culture tradition in Greek century, where we had the ability to discuss and to talk about things very deeply and to dive into a topic deeply, much more deeper than we are doing now.
No, this is not what I meant. And I don't think that, at least I don't want to get into a discussion with someone who has hate. What I mean is, and therefore I think the initiative that Sophie has initiated is very, very important. It's about pointing out, it's about showing what is not okay. It's about reacting, and by listening to them, we may be able once then to act instead of react. So it's not at all about accepting the hate. And after a certain point, we need also to remove. The only thing what I'm saying, if there is an automation that such a Botdog is going to remove it immediately, we may lose a lot of very important information. And looking at what happened in the States, can you imagine if we didn't have a clue, it may have been even worse.
Mm-hmm. Sophie, you also mentioned the responsibility for the younger generations, which you would like to take care of. What do you think about when the younger generation goes into the internet and sees all this hate? And how would you judge your project to help the younger generation getting a more realistic picture of the society?
I mean, as a mom, I always tell my daughter not to swear. And well, she's 5, she's not on the internet already, but it's a bit weird to tell her how she should react. And I know, like, in a year, she will be on the internet and seeing like a very few horrible statements from people. Might be my neighbor, I don't know, but like it's weird that we don't have this thinking in the internet that we are we have to show the younger generation how we want to have discussions on the internet. I think the constant repetition of facts, or also fake facts, or hatred is having a big impact on the younger people, but as well on the older people. And knowing that, it's actually important that every one of us is taking responsibility on the internet, that we have a good and normal discussion culture. Because if it's just what's written now, that influences younger people a lot. And I'm quite scared, especially, well, as a feminist, if I read a lot of very sexist comments, I am quite scared that the younger generation will just think that's how it should be. Women belong in the kitchen, women should not be politicians, whatever. And there, I think that's a perfectly statement. I think that should never be censored. That's okay, someone can write it. But I would love to see a lot of people saying, that might be what you think, but I think women are totally at the same as men, and they should as well do politics. So they have this opinion, this diversity of opinion, and not just this one very loud, quite angry opinion on the internet. And with that, I can think that we can make a difference for the younger generation, and I think also for the older generation, actually. Yeah.
I would like to point out how artificial intelligence could help our society to reach all these goals we have, the ethical, the societal goals. What would you say? Is artificial intelligence rather an obstacle, or is it very helpful? I have the feeling that we now have two standpoints. We have the standpoint of the enterprises with Dalith, and the standpoint with normal people with Sophie. But of course, everything is connected with each other. How would you judge the role of artificial intelligence to reach these goals we have? Dalith, what would you say?
For me, it's one of the most important things and chances that we do have now, in actually every single matter. It really supports a human being, but every single person, as well as corporates, need to use it in a huge responsibility. So the ethical aspects that we just discussed. At the end of the day, there is no way without AI. AI is here to stay, and it's up to us to make sure that we're using it in the right boundaries. And saying that, it's also very important that we're all aware of not everything that it's doable will be implemented. This is also what history showed us. And there are much more good things. Looking at the sustainable goals of the UN, looking at education, right to education, looking at poverty, hunger, and so on and so forth, I can give you numbers of use cases where AI helped exactly to support these sustainable goals. And one of the nicest examples that we just had is Sophie's. I mean, we would never be able to detect all these hate speeches without algorithms, without cognitive or intelligence algorithms learning, but they're learning from us. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'm very afraid of, if I have the feeling that people or corporates have the feeling that they can outsource the responsibility to an algorithm. The algorithm does what we do, what we tell him, then he learns by the data we feed. Mm-hmm. And the last point I would like to mention here is the more data we have, the more accurate, obviously, the result is. It's like a child. The more the child learns, the more his opinion and experience is changing. Mm-hmm. So the algorithm does the same. Now, if we come and we're going to say, yeah, but this algorithm is biased, I must say, the algorithm is not biased. We are biased. Probably the data is biased. And now we have the chance to unbias the bias. The algorithm put the mirror in front of us, showing us, hey, this shouldn't be. And we have the possibility through an iterative process to adjust the algorithms. And this is exactly our responsibility. It's not a plug and play. It's a long process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, Sophie, maybe you also have an opinion on that. If not, I could switch to another question I have.
I would say it was so perfect. I think I don't have to add anything to that statement. That was just perfect.
I have another question which is waiting some minutes already in the F and A section here. We have Andreas Wolters. He said, I will just read his paragraph. I love the statement from Dalith that we are still a long way from applying AI to the use cases that bring the biggest benefits. Are different perspectives and disciplines needed to get closer to that ideal? And as a UX designer, I wonder, what do people from non-AI disciplines need to know or bring to the table?
Very nice question. But I don't know, perhaps Sophie, you want to jump in first?
Well, I can just explain what maybe we did in the project, which was might be interesting. So as I'm not super IT techie, so I'm really coming from a political point of view. And when we started this project, for us it was clear that we are going to work with people more from the linguistic part. And a lot of people are quite shocked, like, how can you do that? First of all, you as a woman, and you have no clue of IT, and how should that work? And we saw that AI programming, it's a skill, but it should not be the only skill you can have. So with the connection of linguistics and IT, we managed to get way further, especially with the connection, for instance, of the connection of a comment with the article. My few friends I have who are coders, they would have never come to this idea because they just see a problem from a different perspective. So we have seen that it was really important having a lot of different disciplines at the table to learn how it could be really better and help a society to defeat the problem, and not just having in the end a really nice looking Botdog, which doesn't really bring anything.
I must say, if someone comes and says how someone coming from linguistics getting into the topic of tech and AI is an ignorant. I mean, I'm a mathematician, must say linguistic, and I did at least a year of linguistics. It's a lot about analytics. It's a lot about the logical way how a language is built. But this just like as a side comment. And yeah, this is what you just mentioned is unfortunately one of the things that happen more and more, that people say, oh, how come that you're talking about AI if you're not coming about from a tech domain? And one of the things that we realize at SwissCognitive, where we're bringing together a lot of different corporates cross industry, we have over 30 different industries. This is where we can learn, and we're working mostly with the business side and not the tech. Now, what happens is we're all talking about, oh, you have to think out of the box. This is probably one of the most difficult things to think out of the box if you sit in the box. So why don't you just outsource the thinking out of the box to those who are sitting out of the box, meaning talk to people from other industries and try to see how you can apply their solutions, their ideas, their creativity into your own domain. Now, as you just said, Sophie, people who write codes, they have certain skills. People who develop business models, they're definitely having other skills. Just one example where I always have to laugh, and I just don't want to offend anyone out there. The nicest example for me is I'm a web developer. Have you ever thought of what a web developer needs to do? And this is probably also a good comment to the UX person that we had before. The one is the guy who develops, who codes, but the other one is a designer, and a designer who studied art or graphic design probably doesn't know how to program because he's definitely in another field. He's probably even don't care about coding. So how do you think can we find a great web developer who can develop you a website which is great also from a user experience, appearance point of view? It's one of the most difficult things. Why? Because there are different skill sets, and this is exactly what we need. We need different skill sets. We need diversity to develop new business models using the technology. The technology is only the underlining. Doesn't matter what kind of technology. It's a language, it's a tool, and it's definitely not magic.
So I would say we would come to the beginning point, and this brings me to another question of a viewer, Gabriele. I don't know how to explain it. Ripside, anyway. She states that given all the ethical aspects, do we first need to train engineers and others who train AI to ensure that bias and discrimination is taken into account when creating various tools, meaning ensuring data is good in that aspect? And Andrew, another viewer, is asking about the abusing from AI technologies. For example, authoritarian regimes can easily use AI for spying citizens. So I would sum up both questions in one to ask, how can we ensure a good education for all the AI users, and then the good education for the people who use this AI not as mathematicians or data scientists. This would go to both of you again, I would say.
First of all, thanks a lot for this question. I think it's a great question, very, very important. And this shows exactly what Sophie just said before. We need people with different skill set, not only tech. This is exactly what gives you the mirror about what do we have to look at, what is relevant, how can we develop.
And I think it's about diversity. I think it's always good talking about the bias, but you don't get rid of your bias by just thinking that you have a bias. You get rid of a bias by having a diverse team. And that's the only way you can get rid of that. I mean, we have seen in the USA, they try to talk to police about racism. You can't change it something about talking about something. You have to change the structures. And so with every team, we need to have a diversity that we can have something with the smallest bias we can possibly have, because we already had a diverse team. And well, the other question is a good question. And we hear that quite a lot as an accusation that we're just like the longer arm of the police in Switzerland, and we're trying to help with that, with the COVID crisis, to lock everyone up who is against or who don't believe COVID is true. And I mean, I think that's also a big problem of a lot of startups, that they do think too late about data and responsibility. And yeah, Stefan.
Carry on.
Okay. We had just discussions about Clubhouse, and we see that they did not think about it too much, and now they have to correct a lot of things. But again, I think if you have a diverse team, and if you have the skills already in your team, that you discuss it from the beginning, as well from a very ethical point of view, how do you want to use data and who's going to use it in the end, then you might have a chance that it's not going to be such a big threat.
If I may just say here one comment. In principle, I agree, Sophie, but there is one thing that for me it's very important, and this is just going to show whether I understood you right or not, what again will show how difficult it is to extract what others are saying and understand in the right way. You said that a lot of startups or also companies like doing projects are probably not thinking enough before they start, and then they have to correct afterwards. And I think it's a mixture. It's a mixture that at the beginning, really, you brainstorm in a diverse team. I absolutely agree. But one of the very important things, especially here, I think, is we have to learn on the job. We have to develop AI in an iterative process. And here it comes. It's really important that people understand that they have the responsibility to come back and say, okay, this doesn't work for it. It's still actually excluding all the women's in this process of checking the CVs. Then we have to go back and say, okay, why is it? So we have to adjust, and we try it again. We bring it back to the audience, which audience ever, and they come back with a response saying, okay, now it's better, but now we saw that there is another thing that doesn't really fit. So this iterative process is a very important thing that we have to do. It's not a plug and play, as I mentioned already earlier. And the expectation that something works from the beginning, it's wrong. We have to manage the expectation. We have to have the openness. And if we look at Siri and all these others, today, I'm actually talking to Siri when I am driving for messages or the emails or whatsoever, because I will never type. At the beginning, it was really annoying because obviously Siri didn't understand me. In the meantime, she's as good that I can do it in German and in English, and it's quite accurate. Now, it doesn't help if at the beginning I say, oh, excuse my French, what a bullshit, because I have to train her. I can't expect from the developer or the company that they send me something that fits, especially to my needs, because we're talking about a lot of customizing. And this is the only thing what I just want to say. Yeah, we have to prepare. I think what is really important, what you said, that we have to be aware what we have to watch out, and the diversity in the team and including a broader audience.
No, I agree. I'm a big fan of trial and error. And as well in our project, that's what we're doing. We're actually learning from the civil society. So we should get better and better over time. It's just, it was just a comment about data protection, about personal privacy. And there you can't, it's very hard to do it afterwards because the data is already gone. That's about that, yes.
Two questions to Sophie. Just picking up what you said about diversity and the comments you partly obviously received from the audience. Yes, I have a question here as well. So first of all, one question. You said diversity. When we were talking about, I think diversity plays a role in your team organization as well, right? Can you just explain what diversity means in your part in building that kind of solution? First question. The second one is, and that refers to a question we have from the audience here as well. In Botdog, I read it, is there cross-verification? In other words, more than one person gives their opinion on if a statement is hate speech or not. So in other words, to say, you're not saying something is good or bad. So it's a crowd-sourced approach, which means that anyone commenting that you're just poor COVID-19 is just a little bit nonsense from my perspective. Am I right? Did I get your algorithm, your process right?
Yes, it's more or less the same question I can answer to. So my team is diverse in the sense of gender. It's diverse in the sense of age. What we didn't manage to have is someone who has not the best education, I have to say. And actually for our community, we had the same goal. So we really wanted to have a very diverse community that we can really assure that the Botdog learns not just from, I say, left feminists, and in the end you have like this one algorithm who's just good for one small part of the, or maybe big part of the community of Switzerland. So what we did is that each comment got rated at least 3 times. And the community and the comments were also rated by accordingly to diversity criteria of the community. So saying that if we had people who were less frequently seen in the community, they had more weight in the end in her. Gosh, I'm sorry. Well, I think you understood, but yes. So that's how we try to be possible to make a cross section of the population towards their feeling of what is hate speech and what is not, by really having a lot of people in the community and a lot of diverse people in the community. Yes, is that enough?
I would say that the artificial intelligence always means that we have to double check everything, and that we have a lifelong learning, and that that's the key to everything. And I would say, Dalith, maybe you can make a statement on that. Even enterprises, your customers, how do they double check, and how do they rethink what they are planning, what they think would be the best for their enterprises strategically?
First and foremost is the exchange with others. And this is one of the things that I'm very proud of, that we managed here in Switzerland, that most of the enterprises, corporates, and at the end there are the people, the employees there, got very open and started to talk about not only best practice, but also worst failures. And at the end of the day, this is what brings us further to learn from each other, to be transparent, to share experience. And for me, this is the best way to go together.
I have another question from Andrew, and I think he is still waiting many minutes. Do you reckon that the advantage of AI application will overweight the possible troubles we could face in a long perspective? Which price must we pay for AI implementation? I think this is connected to my question also. Dalith and Sophie.
Sophie,
I will let you answer this one. I think that makes more sense. Yeah.
I understand, or I think I understand where the question comes from. But first, again, we develop a lot of things. The potential is huge. We will never implement everything that is possible. And looking at the history, where we're coming from, I mean, the human being adapts his behavior to the development of its surrounding. And one of it is technology. My grandma will be 101 in 3 weeks, and she's still alive. And I told you, Andrea, already that I hope that I will find time to write about her, thinking what she went through, or actually the chances that she had with the technology. She's also a journalist, or at least one of her jobs was journalist. I remember when I, as a kid, I had the possibility to go and to see how they print the newspaper. And I remember when she, for the first time, had a fax. How do you say this in English? I even don't know.
I don't know. I would also choose fax as a word.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I don't know what the word is in English. Perhaps it's the same. After that, we had the computers, email. After that, we had smartphones, and we even had the chance to chat with her through smartphones. And this shows me that for the majority, the human being actually benefits from the technology. We learn how to cope with it, and especially we learn to take responsibility to see where the boundaries are. And to answer perhaps also a question that we had before, why do we have cybersecurity? We need cybersecurity. And it doesn't matter what we're going to do, and it doesn't matter whether it's tech or not tech, because since 9/11, we know that you don't even need AI to kill so many people.
That's true.
You're always going to have how do you say, like very bad people. They will always find a way to harm, whether it's with a knife or whether it's with technology. And this is also something why we have to build in the technology, cybersecurity. We have to be aware of how we can actually cope with these situations. So again, not everything that we can develop will be developed. And it's, again, our responsibility to make sure where this journey goes to.
But I find it quite interesting. This is a question which is like a red thread through all these discussions for artificial intelligence and morals or ethics. That the AI topic raises so many societal questions, and that people, every layer of a society is involved in this discussion. And I find this really interesting because it's something like a technology raises so many discussions and so many opinions of every part of society, which is very interesting. And maybe this could be a last question to both of you. Why do you think that artificial intelligence has the ability to do so, to involve every part of our societies?
Connectivity.
I mean, for our project, and like from a perspective of speech, hate speech and free speech, I mean, the internet was impossibly great that everyone without money could be a journalist from day to the other. So everyone can raise her voice or his voice and can be heard. And that's also a big advantage of AI and what was able to build in the last years. And this advantage has also be saved and protected a bit, that we still are able, that every one of us can use AI and technology for good and not for bad. And I think I agree with Dalith. It's our responsibility that it's human made. Everything is human made, what we work with, that we take good care about that it's also AI for good and AI for the people. But yes, it's our responsibility, and it's a big advantage we did, and we should save that. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if we think what happened when the cars started to come into our society, I mean, we just didn't have the connectivity that everyone was able to discuss and raise her voice about whether it's good or not, whether the horse is going to disappear or not. I mean, this is definitely one of the things that we need to be aware of, because we do have the connectivity today, global connectivity. Everyone can say everything to every subject. It seems to us so intensive, but also in the old days, there were a lot of subjects, a lot of development of technologies that raised a lot of discussions. Also, the development of the anti-baby pill. I mean, can you imagine these days if people could have discussed that on the internet? I mean, that was one of the biggest steps of independency of the women. I don't know what would have happened then.
Okay, so I would now hand over to Stefan. Maybe he has some further questions from the audience, or maybe a personal question.
I think we basically answered all the questions, which was fine. I saw the high engagement from the audience. So we saw a lot of questions, which was fantastic. One last question I was just reading. Let's try to figure out where it was. It was in the chat. Yeah, Maria actually was asking, shouldn't we separate internet with social media from social media? I think that refers to stop hate speech again. So the question is, if you talk about that kind of hate speech, is it really on the internet, or is it just a social media problem? And so we should try to avoid to talk about the internet in general.
I mean, every one of us can create now a website with very hateful content, and it's also illegal. So I think, no, we can't. I think what social media brought us that, and that's different, but as well, like comment section on newspapers, that a broad society will see what you're commenting. And that's as well, that's something that's really nice. So you have a big audience who listens to you, but that also means that you can influence people who maybe don't have an opinion yet. So if you rewrite your comment on every article on the newspaper comment section, there are people starting to believe whatever you think. And with that in mind, no, I don't think it's just a problem of social media. It is a problem of the internet. Google is using AI to show you whatever content you want to see. So no, it's like a broader problem. And again, it's our responsibility to deal with it. And it seems always like, and that's why I like Botdog, it's like a possibility to have something humaned up. It's like an algorithm, and now you can see, okay, it's a dog, it searches for hate speech. And I think that kind of explanations we all need, that we can see that all technology is what we did with our hands, and it's not something magic, how Dalith said, that just happened and it's here now. So yes.
Dalith, thinking about AI, ethics, and corporates, what do you think is the current state in the corporate world? How is the ethic discussion going? So is it already arrived at the corporations? Are we still in the beginning, or have we moved on?
It's definitely a very hot topic.
What do you see for the challenges at the moment regarding the discussions in the corporate world?
Actually, it's the same. It's about education, expectation management, and especially showing that we're talking about the technology that enables us to do things better, faster. If we're looking, what are the core competences of a human? Creativity, for example, but definitely not speed or quality. It's just a fact. And if we think what are the core competences of a machine, it is performance and it is quality assurance. So combining those two together, it's going to benefit us. And this is definitely something that we need to be aware, and we need to educate and to also manage the fear. And this, especially the fear, is also very near to the topic of the ethical discussions, the ethical aspects. And it is definitely a hot topic in, I would even say, all the corporates. It is one of the feedbacks that we from SwissCognitive got from all our partners saying, hey, let's discuss around this topic more often and more openly. So yes, definitely.
Thank you, Dalith, and I hope that SwissCognitive can help the companies on their way, as you have been doing all the time now. Thanks also, Sophie, just for that kind of interesting introduction into Stop Hate Speech, which was awesome. And I wish you really good luck with the project. Since Dalith and I are also serving the Disinformation Research Center, yes, I guess we will still keep in touch and see how that is moving. Andrea, thank you very much for being that kind of perfect moderator for this evening. Thanks for doing the job. And thanks for all the audience who have joined us this evening. And I say thank you to all, and I wish you a nice evening. Since it's still COVID-19 time, I wish you stay healthy and have a good time. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, and thanks, and support Sophie's initiative. We all need to do that together.
Thank you.